Hello.
Police shots here this morning. The thing that struck me here, and you're beginning to hear it now, is the kind of eerie, shocked silence of this area at the moment. This should be a bustling residential area.
Tahoe sends out prayers for the Jewish community in Manchester. Maybe a call for prayer too. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about using our using our technology to be aware of all the tragedies that happen. Um, it's like there's so much information. What is relevant, right? That's a topic. And so, like, there are people um, who cause these tragedies, and I think like the part of the there are, and then there are reasons like why people cause tragedies, right? And I think it has something to do with the way that we are using our technology. Our our technology is doing something to us. there's a acronym, what's in it for me. And I've noticed a pattern where people will try to use attention um, for their goals, and people have bad goals. Like the title of this dream is "Kingdom's Coming," and it's like it's very hard for us to be willing to um, surrender the throne of our lives to another. And then also, it's very easy to surrender the throne uh, to the wrong authorities. So both of those can happen. Uh, At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Like to turn reminds me of repenting or to return. And he's responding to the question, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Like, is that even just a bad question? Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. I mean, this is the same Jesus who um, teaches mercy um, at different times. He teaches mercy. Um, who says, "He without sin cast the first stone." What does it mean to when he says, "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me"? I was doing my own little recording thing that I often do, and they end up thrown in the trash or private or unlisted. Rarely are they public. And what came to me is how out of the mouth of children, these, yeah, the words that come out of the mouth of children. And it's like, what if we were able to um, listen to a child um, with the hope that the child would reveal something to us to help us um, be in um, the good kingdom, to serve the good king and to be a part of the good kingdom. What if we listened to a child with the hope that this child would share something that is very relevant? Like, what if that's the way we treated children? That's one interpretation. I've been scrolling and going over different things on YouTube. One of my pastimes. And it's perhaps I should have been listening to my children, listening to children more. I have a hard time. This is a hearing aid, and I have a hard time hearing women and children or high pitched voices. And then I have these cheap hearing aids that they just make things louder, like all things. And they help with my tinnitus. but it's hard for me to hear children. And um, I feel like in the churches, it would be nice if maybe not just the churches, but everywhere, including the churches, if like, what if we gave the microphone to some children and we let children ask questions? Because my experience as a child was um, that I was not taken seriously. Um, so you got pain and suffering in the world. Perhaps much of the pain and suffering in the world is directly connected to how serious we are about listening to children. This is my. I'm still like a child, but I've learned to be scared of of all the people who are not like children, who have no curiosity, who have all the answers. Um, and it's. I mean, I understand why this happens. It's like what kind of people end up in positions of authority in this world, uh, in this kingdom that produces such pain and suffering in this world. Thinking about Job and all the pain and suffering unleashed on Job, like who the people in power, the authorities, they really are they're they're not very good at their job. They're not very good at listening to a child. And then we make them teachers, and we give them guns, uh, give them microphones. We're not handing microphones to children, saying like, "How do you feel?" So like the last time, it was a long time ago. I did some psilocybin, and I uh, I did a podcast with my son. I He loved it. I think there's a fear, you know, do we want to put our children on camera? Do we want to kind of expose our children to this world which is controlled by uh, powers and principalities that know almost they know almost nothing about God, about this teaching right here? Like, do we want to? We want to. And another thing I said in this recording I just made, I could go play it, but I'd said, you know, we operate in secret. That's the pattern I found. Is that we operate in secret. It's the only thing that seems to work, because the people in positions of power and influence in this world, um, they're not going to see you, they're not going to hear you. They're just kind of like, they're blind to righteousness. And so, like, trying to say, hey, I'm a hero, or heroes come over here, it's like there's just it did when I did it, it didn't seem to work very well. um, but I trust God has used it. I think God uses our weaknesses. God can use our mistakes. It's like, there's a conspiracy that the saints and the righteous ones participate in, despite the powers and the principalities and the rulers and the authorities, basically being these kind of blind NPCs. Like, when it comes to the kingdoms, right? I mean, they aren't an NPC in one kingdom, but they are an NPC in another kingdom. What I've learned is that in order to see, for me, I've had to receive grace, and I didn't even see the grace. Um, I think that is um, that's what happens to a lot of us, is we don't see our blessings. We see the curses. The curses, they stand out. They're more memorable, and the blessings are just, we're kind of blind to them. And so when we become blessings unto the world, it's it's easy to be ignored. Um, it's easy, and that's the way. It's the way it is. There's a when there's a poisonous snake, it's like you need to be wide-eyed, uh, ready to move, right? If there's like a bunch of wolves around you, it's like you gotta have your eyes wide open. And I think the powers and principalities, the true powers and principalities, are actually using the same tactics as the saints, and that there's this operating behind the scenes, because it's like a strategy that works in game theory. Like, if you do thought experiments, if you actually do the experiments in life, you'll see what works. And so like it's the there are these it's tricky to name all of it because there's the kind of snake or dragon or wolf that can be within each of us, which is like it's the more slippery monster. Um, and to call an image bearer, which we all are, by the name of that slippery monster, to call someone a snake or a wolf, to call a person, it's like that's a bit of a lie, because the truth is that we are all image bearers. We were made in the image of God, including the children. And then that what is the what do you want to call that kingdom that's not, Jesus said you can only serve two masters. But if God is the the good master, the good king, the good Lord that we aim to serve and practice serving, it's like, well, what's this other kingdom? And that's the one. It seems like hell. It's the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of hell. And so, like, the kingdom of hell is at hand, and don't lose hope and trust God that God can transform and transmute and redeem that thing, because it's all like a vessel. Uh, it can be filled with goodness. Young God says, I think the joke is the snake is more afraid of you than you are of it. Pretty good. Now, I got a story for you. My father, he he was an outdoorsman, an outdoor enthusiast, a hunter and a fisher, with a friend who was a linebacker at Auburn University. At one point, I think he had second most tackles. I think it's changed over the years. Danny Skutak, if you want to go look him up. And I was kind of raised by my father and Danny Skutak, and so I was raised by outdoor enthusiasts. And they have many stories. But one of the stories regarding a snake was that my father's in a canoe and fishing, and Danny is out. I think he has a mask on and he's snorkeling, uh, mask and snorkel, swimming around in a water moccasin. So I could pull up a water moccasin, deadly snake, and it seems to my father that it is trying to attack Danny Skutak, and my father, he would reach out with the paddle and he would fling it. He'd fling that water moccasin, and it would keep coming back. And so, in my experience, the snakes have been scared, but sometimes I've run across snakes that aren't scared. And there's another story where my father stepped on a water moccasin in the path, and there was no retaliation. And so it's like the snake can be scared, it can be aggressive, it can be um, forgiving, the deadly snake. So it's not always the case that the snake is going to try to get you. I mean, it's not always the case that the snake is going to be scared of you. I wish I could be a better storyteller. I I was raised by my father, self-proclaimed bohemian. He he went to college. He wanted to study paranormal psychology. That didn't work out. He still studied paranormal psychology, but the university wasn't into it. I guess you don't make a lot of money with that. And so my dad chose a something like a life of poverty for me. And so I was raised poor, even though my father, he likes to remind me how smart he was, the good grades he had. He did like to remind me. He now tells me about how dumb he is. Um, it changes, right? Um, but made good grades and everything. And he was very smart. Um, but yeah, he chose a life of poverty, and then I remember driving an old truck, and he pulls up next to this dumpster, and he gets out and he goes and looks in the dumpster, and then he's pretty athletic, and he just like jumps up and over into the dumpster. And next thing I know, I see a couch coming up out of that dumpster. And my father proceeds to pull this old couch out of the dumpster and put it in the back of the truck and take it home. And it ends up being our couch in our old shack. I don't know what that conjures up in your head to have been raised in a shack. It was We had 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, an old building. But what's funny about it is my father pulled this couch out of the dumpster, and then he's a strange man. He would proceed to cover. He covered the couch with like sheets, and we would have to. People were trained to are trained to like make their bed. We were trained to also make the couch. So we would cover the couch with a sheet, and then he wouldn't let us put our feet on the couch. He would get on to us. He would get pretty angry when we put our feet on the couch. And so yeah, it's strange that mixture. I heard a story about my father making furniture out of old uh, like containers for beer. So you can take like a case of beer, you can drink maybe the bottles, and you put those back into the case, and then you can use that as a structural element as part of the couch. Yeah, so it was just this strange combination of improvisation skill along with rules about cleanliness. So old shack that was clean. Good morning, Lance. You'll catch up eventually. Double speed, triple speed. remember being a child, and like when I was probably 4 or 5, and learning about the middle finger, and in my wisdom, the wisdom of a child, I'm like, there's no way that it's like, so you're telling me that if I do this weird hand symbol, that um, I'm gonna get in trouble? There was like this one guy, he was like the tempter. He's like, yeah, do this, go do it to the teacher. And then there was this other guy who's trying to look out for me. It's like, no, you don't want to do that. And I'm just like, are you telling me I'm gonna get in trouble for this hand symbol? This makes no sense. This makes no sense that if I just, do some hand symbol that I'll get in trouble. There's no way. I'm going to fight this one. I'm going to test it and I will fight it. There's no reason why we should get upset over a hand symbol. And like I guess I was going to be the authority for all humans in the world at 4 or 5 years old and say, hey guys, we shouldn't do this hand symbol. This hand symbol thing should not make you upset. And I'm going to declare that for the world. And I'm going to die on this hill at 4 or 5 years old. Yawn God. On the first day of kindergarten, I got in trouble because some kid dared me to say damn. And I said it. Like, I don't know how this went down. Like, I wish there were, there's just so many, people have so many stories like this. Like, if we're supposed to, treat children and receive children, it's like, it'd be nice to have the stories of children. But yeah, like, what if we had the actual, like, the real story, but then we could even, sometimes it's nice to, what do they call it, in the movies when you take something based on a true story, right? Make it a little bit more fun. Make a skit. It's like, how did this go down, Yon God? Like, was this in the classroom, interrupting the teacher? Boom, said it. Or did you try to use it in the right context? And then, because that word can be used in so many different ways, right? I think I tried to use it the first time I tried to use it. I was aware that there are these dams for hydroelectric energy, and so I tried to lean into a legitimate use of this word. But it's like, this is the wrong kingdom, isn't it? Like, what kind of a person? I mean, I know the kind of person. My father raised me. He told me he tried to prepare me for this world. And what that means is that we get prepared for the kingdom of hell. That's what, especially, if you're not connected to the kingdom of heaven, right? And you don't know anything about this kingdom of heaven. You just look around and it's like, man, this place is hell. And hey, there's a way to do it in this kingdom of hell in which you can succeed. And so my father taught me and trained me how to succeed in this kingdom of hell. So I guess that's what's happening when they say don't do the middle finger or don't use that word damn. There's these mouth noises and symbols. Meanwhile, old Jesus, uh, I get the sense that Jesus disagreed with Moses. So if you assume that Moses wrote the Pentateuch and said, stone these people to death and burn these people. I don't know if you strangle them, then burn them, or you burn them while they're alive. But that's in that old stuff. But then Jesus, says, "He who is without sin can cast the first stone." It's like he was being very careful with his words. He did not just come in and say, "All right, you name all these words that would cause people to just immediately get fired up and ready to kill him. Not yet. He's not ready to get killed yet. So he's using his words in a way where he um, is able to avoid the killings. Right. So there is something about having wisdom in the midst of the coexistence of two kingdoms on earth. Yon God just arrived off the bus, standing in line at entrance. Kid says, "Don't say DAM." And I said, "What? Damn?" And then he says, "Oh." Then all kids say, "Oh." Then he snitched. Golly. And then what always got me is when I was trying to teach the teachers and the principals about like their immorality. I tried to rebuke my father. One time I told my father, I said, "You're stupid." That's what I told my father. And all of a sudden I just said, whoosh, like the flame erupted and I took off running and he started chasing me. And he was faster than me at the time. And I remember him saying, "You're only making it worse. You're only making it worse." When he should have, like, if my children called me stupid, it would be a different story, you know. And so, like, if you are a servant to Jesus and you have the grace of God, and the child is trying to teach you something, whether you're the young person at the preschool or the father or the teacher or the principal or the law enforcer or the president of the United States or president of the UN or four-star general at the in the Defense Department or the CEO of the multi-million dollar companies, like whoever it is, if you actually were skilled at doing the will of God and had God's grace and God's love, you would handle this situation very differently. What all this all taught me to be very scared and just not trust people. It's like, damn, is everybody messed up? Is everyone in the world messed up? That's what it taught me. It taught me to kind of keep my head down. But God gave me something strange where I just couldn't keep my head down. I think he gave me a kind of stupidity, honestly. And I know if any of you who have known me for a while, I'm sure you have at some point said something like, "How did Gavin not know that was going to happen?" How was Gavin not able to predict that was going to happen when he said that? Yep. Yon God. The awe has an upward inflection. You don't remember when kids used to do this when someone did something wrong and it became like a chorus? Oh. No, maybe there's different cultures who do it, Yon God. Um, I went to school with a bunch of black people, and it had a little different pitch, you know. The black culture had a different pitch. Ooh. You might have heard it in some rap songs. Ooh. And they maybe even said, damn, damn. No, he didn't. That's what the black girlfriends are like. No, he didn't. Oh, he didn't. Oh, I did it to one of my black girlfriends. I was like, she went and told on me. She snitched. No, maybe she snitched afterward, but she told on me. I think I would had the pride in being able to go steal a ketchup packet or something at lunch in the cafeteria, and that may have been it. I had let it. I was just boasting in probably around fourth grade. I was boasting, and I thought she was going to receive it well, but maybe she was in a different kingdom. She got raised in a different kingdom, and then she went and snitched on me, and then she like told me she was going to snitch, and then I also used that middle finger on her while the teacher's back. The teacher was turned walking toward her. I gave her the old middle finger. Young God like that observation. Old thinking face. The different cultures with the different, how'd you put it? The different chorus. And you can add some music in the background. Do, 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 boom, do, 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 boom, do, 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 what? Do a little bit of it all. Hey, almond tree. If I knew all of, like, I think with some of y'all, I end up learning your names, and it's like, am I supposed to name, use your government name? I don't know Yon God's name. If Yon God strikes me as a person, if I knew his government issued name, that he would not like that. And then almond tree says, my name is Jason. You can use my real name. Yeah, I know who you are. Jason has he's part of a band. You want to pitch that band? Like, go, do I have permission to play some of your music? And I think Jason heard you. You have one of the first things you know God teaches is that is not good is for man to be alone. And I think I heard Jason is not alone. He found a partner, and so that's good. Maybe even very good, right? You got to combat that not good. But yeah, I think Jason's got a YouTube channel. He's on Spotify. Jason says you can play whatever music you like. I play in Bearhound from Tennessee and Oyarsa in Colorado. So you play. How do you? So do you travel? You play in two bands and travel, or you played in one and yeah, interesting. I wasn't aware of Oyarsa. I was at First Wednesday Believer service last night, and I actually was recording some of the music because I was thinking like I had a vision at one point of doing the electronica dance religious style, and so I could record all the worship, and then I had this idea of recording the worship and then remixing it with some good beats, and it could be real good. I missed out on the one. There was one song where they really hit it, but I would enjoy that. I think other people would enjoy it as well. All my praise, I give you all my praise, Jesus. That was one of them, and I missed the one that was just. It would just be like I think you can get some beats in there. Mm, 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 mm. You get some beats. You do 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 do. Get some dance music going. I'm a weirdo. At your word, I believe it. Lance,
Good morning, Gavin. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Lance. I've just not felt satisfied often recently, so
Hmm.
I've ended up here. I
Interesting.
have ended up in the Bible more. Like it's so surprising. Like you know, at one point in life, I was like the whole Bible, ugh, and then I went Matthew, and I thought Matthew was like this is pretty good, and then eventually it was Matthew, Mark. I got to the end of the Mark about the snakes. I was like, wait a second, and then I learned, the last part of Mark is contested, but then Matthew, Mark, Luke, then John became okay, uh, and then I always just held Paul off. It's like probably jealous of Paul, Saint Paul, and then I've been reading Paul and enjoying Paul. You know, I don't know. Maybe one day I'll have joy for a lot more books. But I never. Yeah, it's interesting when you don't get satisfaction in things, and then you find satisfaction in a thing that you just never would have predicted that you would find satisfaction in.
Right.
How are you, Lance? You got childhood
I'm
stories?
okay. Oh, I got a lot of childhood stories. But what I missed, I might have missed the very beginning. Were you just reading this, or did something prompt you to this section?
Um, so Matthew 18 is always the for me it means rebuking, and um, it's so that I got prompted to Matthew 18, and then I landed on this, and I just rolled with it, right? So,
Right. Right.
but yeah, the rebuking piece in my mind has to do with conversations. I'm trying to learn how to do it better continually. And so, like, I try to recruit people in private and say, hey, so and so, said this. And it's like, I don't see this. I get, and then I usually just receive silence, because a lot of times people don't want to actually rebuke, and it might even be like, they might think that you're slandering, or they're scared to say the wrong thing, or they don't want to disrupt the peace and harmony. It's like there's so many things that can happen psychologically whenever Gavin comes and says, "Hey, this thing that there's this thing here that I'm calling into question." You know? So that's the reason I was going to go to Matthew 18, and then I landed on this part, and then I ended up maybe trying to encourage/rebuke about how we treat children.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a father, so it's definitely relevant, and I'm a soccer coach, and Tayo kind of tossed in a little bit of news about what has happened um, over in his land, near his land, which is very relevant for him, it being in England. Um, and so, yeah, there's a question as how does the pain and where does the pain and suffering come from? Where do these bad things come from? And maybe even they're in the grand scheme of things, they're not so bad. They can be redeemed. But yeah, I think Tayo helped shape the direction of this thing. Everyone's helping shape it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always been struck by this, like, so really what Jesus is, they're like, they're all wondering, hey, where's my power position going to be, and, worrying about those sorts of things, those worldly things. And, one of the things I was reading, I think it was St. Paisios. I loved his imagery when he's thinking about this, which is like, it's obviously that childlikeness is like, so when a child is hurt and they just run to their mother, like they just know, like, okay, I trust you, like I'm dependent on you, everything's going to be okay. Just that sense of kind of just humility and kind of dependence, and that's what that looks like, right? And I find it funny though. I see a lot of the because you have kids, you'll get this. I do find it funny. It's true, but it's also, if you've had kids, it's interesting. Is they also point that like kids have, and this is true, but kids have humility, right? They don't have the envy and all this other sort of stuff. And while that's true, they don't have those adult versions of that. Like kids get to a certain age, kids can be pretty envious, stuff like that. But yeah. And so thinking about you just in terms of, and I can relate to it to myself, which is, you said kind of unsatisfied, right? Or whatever. I think, is that the word you used, unsatisfied? Well,
Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of that's probably caught up in a whole bunch of me overthinking things like that, as opposed to it's kind of more of these simplistic humilities, connection. Do I have what some people have found, which is this ability to turn to God like a child turns to its mother?
Well, I didn't really have the mother to turn to, so I might
There
not
you go.
know.
So that should be a bad example for some, right?
Yeah. Well, I know what you're talking about, like, but there is this thing. It's kind of annoying to me when I hear, "Mama, mama, mama," and it's like it can be a little too much, It's like, come on
So
now.
your children are having a better experience than you had. Is that what you're? I hope.
I mean, what the thing is, I think you can miss the mark in both directions, right? It's like you can
Right.
become an over dependence on mama, and you can have a
Right.
you can have a lack,
Right.
But you can hear it too. It's like, yeah, I'll hear it, and I'm just like, and then she'll say, "Why don't you go to your dad?"
Well, one of the things I've railed against for a long time, and I try not to do it, but I do it sometimes, is kind of this Bible verse, Bible snippet theology, like soundbite theology. Like you just grab one verse, because you have all this larger context. But one thing, there's twice in my life when I've been under extreme pressure here over the past 15 years. But the most difficult time I had was was working for a guy. I was doing house church pastoring, so I was consulting to pay the bills, and I was working for a Christian guy. And he kind of made all these promises and so on and so forth, and then he didn't come through. So my next 6 months of what I thought was going to be my retainer consulting contract just got pulled at the last minute, right? So I'm trying to figure out, oh my gosh, when you get to the base level of a father worrying about how am I going to feed my kids like 2 weeks from now? Okay. Hey, are we going to be able to keep our house? Like that fundamental stress level. But one of the things I hung my hat on was just seek ye first the kingdom of God, and he will add unto you everything else. Right.
Right.
And so what I ultimately did is like there was only so much I could do for a day during the day to try and replace that income, right? So I would get up in the morning, I'd do my prayers, but I would send out different sorts of emails. I'd make certain connections within networks. Hey, had something fall through, looking for something, just keep me in mind, just if you hear everybody talking. So did all that because you have to get in action. You can't just sit on the couch praying that God will give you a job and a job will show up. Like I've just found that that's not probably the best thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do those sorts of things. And then I'd also go out and show my willingness to like, I'd take any job. Like, so for example, I was going up on roofs as so at the time I'm a, a recovering CPA attorney, but I went up on roofs, like examining examining storm damage, right? I'd do anything. Like, it's okay. Like every job is honorable or whatever, but I would get that done.
Carrying shingles is really hard.
Yeah. Well, whatever, man. I guess you got one. Like you need to do whatever it is. But what happened is I would do that, and then I just threw myself into, okay, seek ye first the kingdom of God. And I was working on some stuff around this Holy Spirit, under the influence movement, these discipleship guides, the writing, the stuff like that. And so I just told my wife, I said, okay, I'm going to get this done. But I'm just going to throw myself into just seeking, right? I'm going to put this thing in place. And what happened is, I would get 3 to 4 hours of just finding ways to seek. I was writing. I went to this coffee shop. It was close to my 12-step group. So people would come in. I was trying to help people. So I just threw myself into seeking the kingdom of God and just into those positive things. And what it did was it allowed me to not slip into despair, right? It allowed me to keep some semblance of not losing my mind, which, of stress, which means then I'm going home, I'm hollering at the wife, I'm hollering at the kids, all that stuff that happens in those moments. I mean, maybe you guys are better than me, but that's kind of what happens when I get into awful moments. And then ultimately what happened was about 3 months into that, I found some ways. I mowed lawns. I just did stuff to kind of figure out a way. But the guy who owned the coffee shop said, hey, and he owned other business. He's like, you've been here every single day for 3 months. What's going on? I'm like, well, da 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 da. And he's like, hey, I got something for you. And ultimately he ended up landing me into a fairly like a long-term gig. And so, so for me, when I find myself in this, I like when I hear you said, whether, going to the Bible, whatever that is, it's that simple thing. I've seen it work. And then, so anyway, I would just share when you think about that for me. Now, the thing is about me, Gavin, is I'm dumb. Like I forget that. So then I find myself in unsatisfied places or stress, and I forget that I have answers sometimes. It's becoming shorter between my stupidity where I realize I have tools to use. Like the older I get, I remember like, oh yeah, idiot, why don't you try to do these things or whatever. But I think what you were kind of doing there, I think that's the answer, right? And it's also the answer when I talk to young men who I've mentored a lot of young guys over the years where they really want to be married and have kids and stuff, and they're single, and so they're like finding every avenue, like whether that might be on some dating app, and then they're this, and then they're going to the singles group at the church, and they're just zooming around trying to, just trying to find a woman, It's like, dude, how about you just seek the kingdom of God first? Like, why don't you just put that aside and just focus on doing those things? And maybe, just maybe, if you really get in a Jordan Peterson way, but probably, but if you start getting yourself in order and spiritually fit, God can then give you someone who's worthy that you're really looking for. So don't seek the thing. Like, it's kind of this weird thing, but if you don't just focus on this thing to try to force it to happen, that if you focus on other things, I'm going to tell you that thing has worked out both ways. One in which, a lot of instances, I would say 60% of the time, those guys ended up meeting someone in 1 to 2 years, something like that. But the other times were that even though they hadn't, those endeavors of pursuing gospel virtues or whatever fulfilled them in a way and helped them get out of that tailspin.
Right. That's good. Yeah, Kim, she received a dream just a little while back about, and that was the message: seek ye first the kingdom. And then we open up the Bible app, and then it's pops up on the Bible app as well. You know, so it's like it's a good one. The Lord's Prayer. It's like there's a part of the Lord's Prayer that's directly connected to that as well. So, saying the Lord's Prayer and then not just saying it, but also like trying to consider, you know, to kind of have it in your heart and mean it, and not just like singing the song without considering what the words you're coming. You know, that's good too.
Yeah, I found that. So as I've found myself into using liturgical prayer, I never did that in my life until I started kind of following, kind of trying to do the Orthodox way sort of things. And I always struggled with prayer. I had times of good and bad. A lot of times prayer was me just talking to God, you know, proclaiming, declaring, stuff like that. That's good. I'm not saying that's bad. But I would always struggle. And like when I didn't have the words to pray, then I wouldn't pray. There are a lot of times in my life, Gavin, when I don't have the words to pray. Like, you know,
Right.
it's 5:30. I'm tired. I might have resentment or whatever, or stresses. And I want to sit down and pray. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, help me today, God, bye. And that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But like when you talk about the Lord's Prayer, is actually thinking about it. One of the things that, if there's one thing that I found that has been the most helpful tool that I've used is like, so you mentioned the Lord's Prayer. So I say the creed, I do the Jesus prayer, I do the creed, I do this thing called the Trisagion prayer. But also the Lord's Prayer is built into that. Is that when I'm saying those, I'm connecting into the words, right?
Right.
And so this charismatic me, this is one of the things that helped is, you know, just saying it like, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You know, you press yourself into it, and I focus on what that means, like to try to feel the impact of the bigness of what those proclamations are, and like to connect into it, and not just try and speed through it or just whatever. Like it's like to connect into what I'm actually saying, what those words actually mean. And then again, I do this thing called the Trisagion prayer, and then I say the creed out loud, the Nicene Creed, and then I connect into that, and it's telling me who the Father is, Jesus, the Holy Spirit. Like it's just like it's this thing that I'm connecting into, and so trying to bring connection to the words, like instead of just rote. It's not. It's like bringing my heart. What I would say is I'm bringing my heart into it. Dude, it is just blowing the doors. Like it's just blowing the doors off of my quiet time or my connection time. Like if there's one thing that we all get these one things where like Jess is a Job guy, you know, like he's going to talk about Job or whatever. The one thing that I would bring is probably my wooiness is if I could connect people into that sort of prayer, and it doesn't matter. I don't care what you are, what doesn't, it crosses denominations, everything else doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like but that's why it's almost like a mere Christianity thing. And I was just someone who struggled with prayer,
Right.
like my whole life. You know, it might come easy to you, Gavin, but it was super hard for me.
No, it doesn't come easy for me. I mean, I can do a rote prayer in my mind. I can do the Lord's Prayer by rote in my mind, but you know, there's something to like if you smile, like and really, then you might not even be happy, but if you smile, it can actually start changing like your endocrine system. It just strikes me that you know the way you are saying the Lord's Prayer can do something as well. Like instead of just saying it in your mind, you could say it out loud, and then instead of just being like monotone, you could um, put some feeling into it or some emotion into it, you know, and that can, and there's power in that, right? That's what I got.
Yeah.
And what you were talking about, like it becomes more real and more potent, you know, than just reciting some monotone prayer in my head, you know. And there's other things I do as well. Like that word hallowed, like it might be that I'll accidentally say the word say in my mind I might say hollow. And you know, hollow is a little different than hallow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, being careful with well, what do these words mean? And
Mm-hmm.
like and then meditating on the words a little bit can help as well.
Yeah. I was also thinking when you like just thinking about my kids. Well, like it's very rarely that they're just going through the motions on things. Like what's coming out of them is like real. Like they're connected to, you know what I mean? They're connected to it. They're feeling it. Like it's, uh, yeah. That's the joy of being a kid. You don't have to worry about so many things, you know?
Lance, it occurs to me that we could attempt to rebuke each other on politics. I know that I or we could have a meta conversation about how to talk about politics, you know, but I recall you and Jacob in the wake of Charlie Kirk, uh, and I recall not being I was like I had to get away from it. That was my instinct was to just get away from it, and even you know I tried to be very careful earlier, you know, when Tyro shares news about what's happening and what happened in England recently. Um, and so, yeah, the like I realize how powerful and potent our minds are. And then there's this thing about relevance as well. And so, um, but it's like we can't ignore politics either. Like having the conversations are important. Um, but then there's things I want to say that would like rebuke entire groups of people, you know, right? And not in every group of hurt people, not just one or the other. Like I have rebukes for everyone, you know.
Yep.
And it's like, I mean, to become like that child, you know, to be able to receive or to be able to be humble, with to be able to do that is very important if we ever hope to get our politics right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's tough. I obviously,
Like
one Jacob.
the name of this thing is Kingdom's Coming, and it's like that. And there was a way in which Jesus related to the powers and principalities and authorities, and there's something about conspiracy and operating a secret, and both you know, kingdom of hell and kingdom of heaven, like the 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 wise as serpents within both of those are doing things in very clever ways, and then how are we supposed to play these games? You know, the political game. Uh, it's a bit
Well,
of a mystery that I want to participate in to a degree, but it does. I guess uh, there's a little bit of fear in there, right?
yeah, yeah. It's so well. One of the things that is just so evident, which is just for me personally, right, is that Jesus causes us to walk in this tension of uh, praying for our enemies, blessing those who persecute us, right?
Right.
But then he also would, but also, you know, we're also supposed to fight for the oppressed and all these other sorts of things. We're not doormats, for you know, for example. And he certainly did things that rebuked the leaders of the day, right? Would
Well, he did
say
it.
things.
He did do it at a right time as well, though. Like it's kind of like he could,
Huh?
yeah, like he could have done something early in his ministry, and he might have just been executed right off the bat, you know. But he
Yeah.
there was an order. There was like an unfolding and a timing that probably had some wisdom behind it, right?
And even its birth, right? So I believe that, you know, God was intentional about the time in history, right? That it was, you know, time for the incarnation. So anyway, so my thing is like, okay, so as I process that and so on and so forth, I always need to check myself, right? So you know, one of the things I did in its aftermath was I doubled down on my Jesus prayer time, Right. So I knew me personally. Like, so, okay, first I just need to talk or to worry about Lance. So I don't need to worry about you, Gavin. Like, I need to worry about what's my response. Right.
Right.
And so what do I need to do is I need to get into my spiritual practices to get my term that's used in 12-step programs is get yourself spiritually fit. What's your spiritual fitness like? You know, so on and so forth. So there's that deal there. And so, you know, in terms of, you know, just in terms of the tension we have to live in, which is, yes, we have to love our enemies, but that doesn't mean that you have to doesn't mean in every instance you have to let your enemy kill you. He also talked about if you go into people's houses and they're not welcoming, you know, walk out and wipe the dust from your feet. Like, so we have all these tensions, these paradoxes that we need to try and live in. You know, when we go up to the meta side of things, which is, you know, when we really, all the videos we've been watching, all of us in the corner have seen, we have these very two divergent worldviews, right? And how they play out,
I'm a bit of
greatly affects people.
I'm a bit of a mediator. Like, I don't really have these worldviews that a lot of people have, but I get your point. Most people have like polarizing views.
Well, so we talk about, so what is it? It's the kind of secular atheist thing that's kind of we're talking about modernity and the fall of modernity.
I would say ultimately there's a materialism there which really cares for like this world, and it's like kind of most important, that this world is most important, right?
Right. And so, and then there's this, like, this brings in like where Nathan Jacobs did that study of the nuns, the non-religiously affiliated, people are talking about moral therapeutic deism and all this other sort of stuff. But basically we've kind of been, at least very acutely, been living under, these are blunt bad terms, Gavin, but I'm just trying, we have been living under, and Paul Vanderklay keeps playing this clip of Tim Keller, right? Where he's critiquing both the right and the left, right? But he's pointing out, in terms of the liberal democracy, is what's happened is that cathedral of secularism has then now come to impose they're using governments, things, whatever, to impose their will down on others, like their own purity test. And you have this sense of we're all going to worship something, and a lot of people don't realize that they're worshiping something. And so you have this kind of thing that I think is preventing human flourishing. And on the flip side, which is, I love this whole dread Christian nationalism. And yeah, there's this, what's the guy's name? The Moscow, Idaho guy, Doug Wilson, who says, oh yeah, I'm a Christian nationalist. Like, there's this place in the middle, which is like, well, I'm an American, man. Like, I admit I'm American guy through and through. So this whole idea of some sort of nationalism in terms of what, you know, people would talk about as state church or something like that, certainly not down with that. But we don't have to leave, and this is what Tim Keller talks about in that video, is like, what's happened now is they're like saying, oh no, leave your Christianity at home. Like, do that in your bedroom. It's almost like, I don't care what you do in your bedroom with Christianity, but you can't bring this out in the public square or bring those viewpoints out, right? That's not how our country was founded on. And if you're a Christian, you can't do that. But the big spell that's been cast is like, oh, you can't talk about that stuff in the public square. You can't bring this into this, that, or the other. And so it's this really, really weird time. I do think, as it relates to whatever politics are, or I might even say participating in our society, right? Or participating in our communities, or participating within the structures that ultimately dictate how things can go in your life. You don't have to disengage from that. Like, and I don't think that Christians are called to, or I would just say conservatives are supposed to, well, I'm too cool for politics and I'm just so smarter than that or whatever. No, I believe I believe that it's okay to have civic engagement. The problem is, Gavin, I'm checking my own self. How do I positively engage? Right? How do I engage How do I positively engage? How do I engage how would I engage like Christ? And Christ was not a doormat. Like, we don't have to just take everything. But on the flip side, he does call us to do things in a very different way. So it's a really challenging thing, Gavin.
Well, here's an identity. I created something. I actually shared this with my CEO. I was trying to recruit him into the conspiracy. But one of the paragraphs says, "For me and my recommendation, my identity, commitment, and trust is in Jesus, my King, who commands this way of being from a throne in which he is always willing to let you take back that throne at any moment at your own peril." And so it was about this identity thing. And so, like, identifying as an American, identifying as an Orthodox, identifying as a conservative, identifying as a Republican is like, those identities can become idolatrous.
Sure, anything can, right?
Yep. And so, like, for me, it's like, I think as a Christian, I can go into the Democratic Party, I can go into the Republican Party, I can go into any country, and it should work. Right?
Yes, we can be Christian. We can be Christian anywhere, but sometimes being Christian might cause you to get murdered too.
Well, there's a wise as serpents and gentle as doves teaching.
That's that tension he puts us in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, so, like, I guess I could go ahead and just say the thing that's so, like, for example, the immigration policy for me is like it's like kind of like the least Christian policy, and one of the least. There's a few of them in, like, the Conservative Party, right? The other one I would put, like, the war on drugs. I'd put war on drugs and drug laws and immigration laws, and the way we enforce those laws and prosecute and respond to people who break those laws. The way we do that is, like, there's a lot of ways to improve it. And so, like, and then, like, I can understand the perspectives of people who would say, well, if you are, in the same way that some people uphold abortion and say, I'm a conservative because abortion is the most important issue, there's people who might say, well, immigration is the most important issue, or the war on drugs is the most important issue. And then they can really get kind of fired up and then pick sides about who's the enemy and everything. And then if you don't have the grace to love your enemy, which I think Christians need to remember, like, this does not come naturally. Like, this is a supernatural grace. Then it makes perfect sense that people would become angry and resentful toward their enemies, right? So
yep.
Hopefully I said that in a way where it landed well.
No, it is. And so, for example, there's a part in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous where there's this great, it lays out the program, and then it has all these stories in the back, right? And one of the stories is it used to be called Acceptance is the Answer, but I think it's called something now. But basically, it was just talking about you have to accept people, places, and things as they are, right? To a certain extent, like in terms of resentment and those other sorts of things. And this also happens when people in 12-step recovery groups go through the 4th and 5th steps. You don't just write down people you're having problems with. Like, you're writing down, like, you might put, I have a resentment with the Democratic Party, for example, or the Republican Party, or whatever, or I have a resentment against the United States government, whatever that is. Like, what you realize is you're fighting all these different things. Like, it's people, places, and things. And so the whole idea is coming from a place of resentment, right, is not the place to come from. Okay. That also would map onto a Christian response to that. And so how do you engage in those things? So one of the things that was helpful for me, and I knew it, my wife and I have talked about it. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk's killer, for example.
Okay. I
saw this picture that was his dad had shared one Christmas morning. Where I didn't want to forget about Tyler. I don't know if he's going to talk to us for the next few months. And he was sitting there, and what he got was a new laptop. He had headphones, right? He had this cool keyboard and he was staring into this screen, right?
Yeah.
This young man got confused, right? He
Right.
got radicalized. He lost his way because his parents were law-abiding citizens. From all accounts, it would appear that they would have been conservative or whatever. But my empathy. So here's where, and I remind myself this of every morning, right? I need to have empathy for people that have been confused by, I would say, not a spirit of Christ, but principalities, powers, whatever's he got caught up in a spirit of confusion, which caused him to do an unspeakable act. So I need to have great empathy for him, and I do. Like when I saw that picture, you know what I saw, Gavin? My sons,
Mm-hmm.
right, and how trying to give them things and everything else, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's me, like that's my son. Like there but for the grace of God go I mean, I'm not immune to all that, and so I have this great empathy. Now, like the same thing I've told my kids, I said, you guys can say or do anything and I'll never not love you. And I've used this example, like if you talk to my kids, listen, if you murder someone, you're going to have to go to jail and pay the price, but I'll come visit you in jail. Right? There's nothing you can do that I won't love you.
Right.
And so when I extend that out then I need to extend that out to one of the things that's frustrating. We're all subject to bullshit. Vervaeke doesn't want to be bullshitted, right? We're all subject to propaganda and bullshit, right? So we all know that. At the same time, what's frustrating is that there are things that have been proven to be completely untrue that are hoaxes of the materialist secular machine that have happened in recent history, which have been proven to be materially untrue. Yet all the machine dominant media, I would just say Democratic Party, all these other people, and a lot of those people, they still believe those hoaxes hook, line, and sinker, right? And that angers me. It's like, can we just look at the doc? No, they don't even want to have their worldview challenged. That being said, here's the empathy I have for that, which is they've also just been sucked into this machine that has this total disconnect between reality. And if you would believe those things, of course, you would act certain ways. So my answer to response to that, Gavin, is I need to personally have empathy for understanding that. And I also point out, I don't know everything. How can I know everything? Like I can't know the truth on everything. Like I can't know that thing. But at the same time, we're such a disconnect in what reality is right now that it's a very dangerous time. And but I need to go with a heart of empathy, but also we don't have to. So this is the rebuking. We don't have to accept the thing that they're seeing and believing that you just know is not true. Like you don't have to put up with that BS anymore either. It's a hard tension to live in.
So I mean, I like there's a bunch of responses in the midst of the situation, and I like to look at them like what would work, like what would actually work. And like what would work is if we could lead by example, right? And I think part of the problem is that the Republican Party is not going to be able to do it unless it gets like possessed by people who are possessed by the Spirit of God, right? And so I can look at Donald Trump with like spiritual discernment, and I can say, not possessed by the Spirit of God. Somehow, we've got Christians who are like, yeah, I've heard a lot of things from people who identify as Christians regarding Trump. Ideally, people who know God best would be able to serve and help within these systems. So there's these systems of power and influence, and they seem to exclude Christians from what I can see. The people who have attempted to uh, be one with God, who have attempted to have Christ incarnate within them. And that seems like a problem. It seems like a problem that could be solved, but it's a really
Yeah.
hard problem and it requires rebuking, right? And so, like, I could say, well, Lance, we know, like, we know Paul Vanderklay, and Paul Vanderklay knows Pajot, and Pajot knows Peterson, and Peterson knows Rogan, and Rogan knows Trump. And then I could say, hey, um, I could say something like, um, you know, it would be good for the world if Donald Trump would listen to Gavin Palmer, right? I could say something like that. Now, where does that go? It's a big nothing burger, probably, right? But it doesn't have to be, right? We're all like 5 or 6 steps away from the people who have positions of power and influence and authority. But then there's this thing that keeps us like afraid to, like, there's what is that thing that would prevent the conspiracy such that uh, the Holy Spirit just kind of fills all of these institutions, right? All of these as much as possible, all the people and all these systems. Like, why wouldn't you want to get on board with me and say, I think Trump needs to talk to Gavin?
Oh yeah, I'd be totally for that. Are you familiar with King Cyrus? I mean, he delivered the Jews out of the Babylonian Empire. Now, there's a wonderful writer. Her name's Selena Zeta. She's out of Pittsburgh. She's just a. I don't think she's a college educated. She was just kind of a gumshoe, old school reporter or whatever. And she just meets and talks to people and will just tell you, this is what they're thinking, right? So she talks about, she goes through in the middle of somewhere, she gets off the beaten path. She just talks to people and lets them tell their stories. And she doesn't really want to have an agenda around that, but she got together with this guy named Brad Todd. And one of the things they liken to what people would, so some people would ask the question, why would a Christian person vote for Donald Trump? Like, that sounds nuts, right? Like, he's clearly not exuding that stuff. And it's kind of like, kind of almost like this King Cyrus, which is kind of like, hey, yeah, I'm not really worried about his spirituality because I know he's going to do the things and combat the forces that are ultimately, seeking to destroy our way of life. Right. And so, yeah, he's an imperfect vessel, but he's a vessel that that helps advance that. And these are like human beings in different places around the country. These have been people that voted for Obama twice, and those sorts of, just like with this weird sort of deal. So, like, there's that. I also think the interesting thing is if you look at the cabinet, if you look at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, when you have someone like JD Vance, when you've got someone like Marco Rubio, people that are really like trying to live out their faith, right? So you do have some people around in that sector who are there. Gavin, I've always said something, and I know people will tell me I can do it. I've always said this one thing, which is like, I don't know if a truly Christian man, like for myself, like if I wanted to live like Christ, like I don't think I should be the president, because I think sometimes rulers have to do certain things that I wouldn't want to do as a Christian man. You know what I mean, Gavin? Like, I think we have way too many wars. I think we're running around, engaging in the world way too much. I think it would be very anti-war, but I think there is a time for it. I just don't know what that time is. So, I know that's controversial, and a lot of people argue with me. Well, yeah, you totally can do that, and this and that, and just war theory. And I read this book called The Ethics of Beauty, which called just war theory bullshit. Like you can always find a justification and stuff. And so, like, I almost even wonder like whether I could be a truly Christian man and then do what I need to do as president of the United States.
Well, I don't. I'm not sure a Christian man can be elected. I would put it that way. But
that's interesting. Yeah. Why do you say that?
Well, I just wanted to keep going. There are definitely hard decisions that the president has to make, but there are also mistakes that the president is making that can be solved if he was surrounded by the right people, right? And so a good Christian man should want to help, like not just the Republican president, but also the Democrat president. And
Yeah, we
like,
should all root for good, yes, flourishing for all of us.
it's
Yeah.
not just a root. Like I've actually submitted job applications to all these presidents. You know, I've been doing it. You know, it's like, and it's not about like one or the others. Like I can come in and help a Democrat party. I can help a Republican party. Uh, but they even have a system in place which um, many Christians are supporting, which prevents the people who have solutions from connecting with the people in positions of power and influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's like whenever I put out an invitation to say, hey, like, can Gavin Palmer speak with Donald Trump? Like, become partners with Donald Trump. I would say the same thing about any president, no matter their party, and I would say I know I can help them, right? But why would you believe that Gavin can help the president, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how, from your perspective, is like, man, this guy sounds proud and arrogant and delusional, right?
Well, actually, what he is, if you actually go back and get to the hux of it, he grew up in the church. Norman Vincent Peale, he's the guy who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. Okay. So if you trace back into his roots, his mom took him to that church. And so Norman Vincent Peale, if you would look at when he starts talking about this is going to be the best, the beautiful, the whatever, like he just lives his life under this sense of I am going to manifest greatness by just proclaiming all these things. And I'll say, oh, like hyperbole, right? But people say, oh, those are lies. Those are all these different things. Also, so when you think about those sorts of things, he's a very easy character when you understand what his root is and what he's trying to say with that. Now, the other thing that I do appreciate about, so I would appreciate this about Trump. I disagree with him when he said Charlie forgives his enemies, but I don't. I want my enemies to suffer or whatever. Like he just whatever. Like a politician, a polished politician will lie to you in that moment, even though that's actually what they believe, right? So I would just say, so Obama would go out and give some sort of speech and it would sound great and it would sound nice, but he actually does want retribution against his enemies. He just won't tell you that publicly. Trump is an open book. Like he's very transparent. Like I know people say he just meets with people, speaks off the top of his head. Now, the beautiful thing that I love about this guy,
I mean, if you say hyperbole, then that's confusing. Like it's hard to say it's transparent. It's more like some level of translucency. Like it's a.
Have you ever been around people that the people who do audacious things and build audacious things and achieve audacious success? It sounds crazy, and hyperbole can sound for people that haven't been able to manifest that, like it sounds like that. But you know, when Steve Jobs or I'm trying to put Trump. Let's go to something else. Like, no, there are these people that get these audacious, big. I'll use Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was just a young guy, started with nothing. By the time he was 31, he built out an organization that has an annual budget of $100 million a year and employs over 1,000 people. Right? He had built a machine that was stronger than the Republican National Committee. Just with these audacious, we're going to do things with excellence, we're going to out hustle everyone or whatever. So I would push back against that. The beautiful thing, I think, though, Gavin, is this, which is it's going to be good for our country in this way. We only have 3 more years of Trump, and so we can get rid of that boogeyman. And then now we're going to go to the next thing, right? So what does that end up looking like? But I would just say, so I would say this right now, like much like a Joe Rogan, much like an Elon Musk, much like RFK Jr., much like a Tulsi Gabbard, like 60, probably 70% of the current Republican Party that's in power, like those guys gals need to be like get thrown out of the party. Like they're just as like mealy mouthed and have done as much harm as anything else. We've had these upheavals though, both on the Democratic side. It was the rise of Bernie, right? The populist Bernie movement. Then you had Trump, and all they did was capturing this energy that's in this country. Like something's broken, and we need to start doing things differently. And put that into this whole frame we talk about, which is the meaning crisis, which is being caused by people who are sucked up in this materialist, modernist frame that doesn't work. And then you have Christians who are also sucked up in that frame and they don't realize they're sucked up in that frame. Where do we go from here? I don't,
Well, I think you have a biased view, and that I think you'll tend to see the good things that Donald Trump has done and not see the evil that he does. And I think like there's people like Charlie Kirk's assassination, the assassin who would tend to see the evil that Donald Trump has done and not see the good. It's like we as humans will tend to have these biases where we won't see both. We don't want to see that mixed bag of both good and evil that's within every person.
Right. So that's that tension you and I have talked about. So for me, on a personal level, that's where I've had it. And it was as the result of just realizing in this moment, because it really the Charlie Kirk thing greatly impacted me. I had a visceral, when I heard it, we all have those moments where we hear things of moments in your life where you get the pit in your stomach. You know what I mean? You get the pit in your stomach and those kind of moments. So that's why I had to take it to prayer.
But why would the death of Charlie Kirk mean something and feels different than the deaths of others that are happening? Boom, there goes another one. There goes another one. There goes another one.
Well, that's naturally human. It's relevance realization. It's salience to you. Now,
but there's someone who's taken the whole. There's people who are like controlling.
No, but I'm not disagreeing with you. But you do understand in your own life. Why does that happen? I don't know, right? But as human beings, even in your own life, Gavin, you don't react the same way to hearing about every death. But it doesn't mean you don't mourn or feel co-commiserate with. So, for example, we just had the LDS horrific tragedy.
Tayo pointed out something that happened in England that just maybe in the last 2 hours.
And I immediately had my heart immediately sunk, and I felt for them. And I thought man, it is so gross. No, in real life, no one said this, but online this stuff happens. You have idiots like, well, Mormons aren't Christians. What are you talking about that today for? That's just asinine, right? It's repugnant, right? And so I certainly had a mourning, and I've been thinking about it. And I actually took it to my prayer. I don't know why certain deaths impact me more than others, but they just do. And that doesn't mean that. So, for example, anytime there's gun violence, my heart sinks. Like, it's just awful, right? Anytime anybody's murdered, that poor young girl who got murdered on the bus from Ukraine, right? Just sitting there on her phone, and all of a sudden a guy just slashes her and walks out. Like, all those things make you sick to your stomach to a certain extent. But some things hit you hard. But something hit you harder, and I don't know. I can't explain why. I don't know why that was. But
so, like, if the technology were gone, like the information technology were gone, there would be something connected to like time and space, right? It would be like, how far away are these people? How many times have I interacted with them? Do we have shared identities? And this would shape the intensity of the feelings that happen. So, the loss of our wife or our children.
Yeah, I think that does.
Different. There's all this kind of. We weren't. To summarize it, we weren't designed for this world in which we learn about, the tragedies that are happening throughout the entire world. That's not, we weren't designed for.
It's too much to handle. Yeah, no, it's too much to handle.
But then it's being weaponized. It's being weaponized. Like, it gets used for people to have power and influence.
Sure. And that's why for you individually, how do you engage with technology? How do you engage with the images, right? What are you doing in your daily life to disconnect that, to get grounded and living? I agree that what's happened is everything's got sucked up from the local and has us on this global and national worrying thing. Like this whole idea that people were so passionate about, they were able to get people so passionate about Ukraine, for example, right? It's interesting. So I'm a hyper localized guy, Gavin. And now I would say this when family members or my personal friends die, I have that same feeling that I had about the Charlie Kirk thing. So it should be more local. And so I would just say this, I am struggling. I continue to struggle. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to be different. I struggle how to engage with what you just mentioned there in my own life, Gavin, right? I'm struggling with how do I engage in my community. You know,
Yeah.
you start right in front of you. Like Sam did you run for the local school board, Sam? Right? Is that true? So he started right where he was at.
I'm on my
so
local
there's those
school
sorts
board.
of things. Yeah, so we started on. So you need to start there. And then what's my response? Like, so I'm struggling with all this because my animal instinct wants to get pissed off and bring retribution and own the shit and all that other stuff.
Which is the, like, if in the midst of it, if there was an assassin in your house targeting your wife, like, this is like relevant, right? Like that.
And it's still,
But
I agree with you. It needs to be more local, but doesn't mean that things can't, like, but also you would also grant to me that it doesn't mean that an assassination of someone in your country that are things that could impact you and your family, that shouldn't matter. But I agree with you. What's happening?
But it can be so big and complex that most, like over 99 something percentage of humans just can't even don't know what to do with it. And so then it would be good. It's like, are there humans who know what to do with it? You know, does anyone know what to do with it? Can we like at least humble ourselves and say, like, what are we going to do about it? Right.
Yeah. I think we're struggling with the map, and I'll shut up and let Sam talk. Like, I do think, and so I think we're struggling. We're talking about this in the TLC, trying to disconnect myself from all this information because that's bad for me, right? Luckily, I have rooted, grounded practices and principles that I do on a daily basis. I have a local church community. I have a local AA community. I'm sorry, a 12-step community that I can go to, right? So that's like real. It's grounded. It's based in getting me centered in my relationships with fellow human beings. Is trying to, you know. So I'm lucky. Most people don't have that in their life. And as Sam is so artfully kind of tacking into this moral therapeutic deism, we're talking about as Paul's wrestling with both sides or whatever. I don't know, both sides is the wrong word, but anyway, I'll shut up. Sam, I'm glad you came. But I don't disagree with you, Gavin. I'm trying to get more local.
Hey, Sam.
Hey,
Thank
Sam.
you for hopping in.
Hi, I'm still just trying to figure out what the stream of thought is. It seems like a balance of trying to know what to care about in a local embodied life versus sort of national and international news, and whether Charlie Kirk should make us feel sad or not, because you know,
and how to make those connect in the right way. Like I think Lance is right. Is like we want to care for the whole world, and we need to care locally, and then there's some amount of like skill at trying to live that good life, you know, in order that you can do everything you can do to be helpful everywhere, right?
Right. There was that moment when Grim Grizz and Jordan Hall were talking, right? And Jordan Hall is explaining how in his ideal communities, like you have to be a monk that goes on like a 3-day fast before you get access to the internet or something like that. And you use it for very specific liturgical uses. And Grim Grizz asks, so would you not know about the kids in Somalia being bombed in that world? And Jordan says, well, probably not unless you needed to. Okay, but who needs to know about the kids being bombed in Somalia? And I think that, yeah, this whole national...
Flip that question too. Who doesn't need to know? Like, it's a similar question, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And do I need to tell my 3-year-old during her bedtime routine that, oh, by the way, 50 kids in Somalia died of starvation today, or something like that? Probably not. But I do feel like the national zeitgeist in our country is a real thing that does really affect us. But yet at the same time, I sympathize with the point of view that a lot of it is just sort of shadow boxing and ephemeral and driving people crazy for no good, material reason. And how to go between those two things. Like Lance mentioned the school board. One thing that I find really interesting about being on the school board is that I know the other school board members like national level political views, but it's often very different than their actual political views as I would see it when it comes time to make a real decision about real money and real stuff in their real community. Right? It's like, okay, you might think you're liberal, but you're shockingly fiscally conservative when it comes to our own school's budget and your taxes. Interesting, right? It's like, oh, you are very sort of globalist, but you do not like partnering with the other schools right next to you for anything. Like those sorts of things. Like, I think that people's real political instincts come through in a very different way when they're voting on or making decisions about things that they understand the impact of much more concretely in their imagination, or they almost don't need to use their imagination.
They will have to deal with the consequences of the decision. Right?
Right. And when it's this abstract national level politics, there's so much of this virtue signaling, like psychological, vibe affinity mapping and stuff like that, because I can be so abstracted from the actual thing. Like, what? Okay, this government shutdown, like at some level, I don't really know what it's about. I don't know how this is going to affect me or not. I don't know the details of the latest proposal of the bill from each side, how many trillions of dollars that is or isn't, what it would be spent on this way or that way, and what the fight is and how that'll affect me. I can't really understand that.
You do know
honestly.
that you do know that automation is on the horizon and we ought to prepare for it.
Right. But I do know if we're deciding which Spanish curriculum to go with for our children, should we vote on that Spanish curriculum or that Spanish curriculum? Right? Like,
Yeah.
That's a decision I can mostly understand. But I can't understand this government shutdown thing and what it means for me and what it means for everyone else. So I just sort of pick the side that is the side that I like, that says the things about things that I do understand, and then trust that they're making good decisions about the stuff that I don't understand based off of culture war signaling that I do understand or something like that. It's very strange.
So Sam, what if we could use like an artificial intelligence to analyze the big problems in order to provide chain of thought for, if you do this, these are the probabilities of what could happen, and then have the explanations and reasons through all those chains. It's like, if you run that, say that's possible, there's only a handful of people, like the percentage of humans who could actually like even begin to manage all of that, like all of those decision trees, is very small. Like, I think in general, like among humans, like there's just so few humans who can handle any amount of complexity at all. And then we elect them.
Yeah. And the people that we elect are certainly not those people. That's the one thing I know.
Yeah, they're rare. They're rare.
Yeah. So I tried to make a pitch to Lance that like let's let Gavin Palmer have a conversation with Trump. And it's not necessarily it has to be Gavin, and it's not necessarily it has to be Trump. But the idea would be that there are people who can bring insight into the problems that we face and the potential solutions and the outcomes and the trade-offs of those solutions, such that they should be in conversation with people who have power and influence. And I would
Well,
argue,
the funny thing is you know who one of those people were, Gavin? So get back to why this. Charlie Kirk was one of those people. He was so Charlie. If you actually spent some time, one of the things I'd had this feeling, and I should have said it. But he was very TLC like. He was an autodidact. Like he didn't go to college. He learned all this stuff. He was very bright. He was kind of young and hungry. He loved delving into talking about philosophy and theology.
there's two evils in the Republican Party is the war on drugs and immigration, right? Like the way that we handle those things can get better, right? Now, Charlie Kirk, he supported a system that handled the war on drugs and immigration in ways that are evil, right? And we're not.
Well, that's the way you view it. No,
mercy.
that's certainly the way you view it. But that's your opinion.
I know I could claim to have solutions to the problems that are better than the solutions that are being implemented. That's a claim, right? So it's not even an opinion. It's just like I have claims. And
But here's the deal: Charlie would have listened to you. Charlie would have listened to you. He would have listened to you. Now, whether he would have agreed or not.
No, would I have been able to have the conversation with him, Lance?
If you had gotten up at a microphone at an event, I bet that you could have made your point, and that probably his default answer would be to defend the thing that he already thinks. But, he's also doing that. I'll admit, I didn't know a ton about Charlie Kirk before he died. I know who he was. I had watched maybe a sum total of 10 minutes of clips of him, just that mostly, some social media feed threw in my face almost involuntarily, right? I almost never sought him out to listen to him. I never really disagreed with the guy, but one thing that I thought was interesting is that when I would listen to him, I'm like, he sounds like a George W. Bush era Republican, and that I can guess pretty well what he's going to say, right? He seemed like mapped territory, and that he wasn't really articulating much in ways that I hadn't heard before. But one thing I think I underestimated is I think I do not know or did not know, or I'm still getting to know how different the younger generation's experience has been than mine, especially teenagers and young 20-somethings, Gen Z, or even younger than Gen Z. They don't remember George W. Bush. They don't remember, even vague hints of Ronald Reagan days, because that, to me, that just seemed like kind of standard Republican stuff. But here they have some kind of, handsome, put together young guy who's a little bit older than them, but not too much older than them, right? People often like someone who's a little bit more mature than they are, but still close enough to their age where it feels like he's on our side or he gets me or something like that. And he's going around to all these people and he's just articulating this and he's doing a good job and he's making his points. And that was just brand new to so many teenagers and 20-somethings who had been raised in such a progressive echo chamber that they had never even gotten a chance to hear what to me sounded like, well, that's what Republicans always kind of say.
Well, the funny thing is about Charlie is he actually was not. He's a Buchanan. So to give you a map, he's a Pat Buchanan Tea Party, anti-Republican establishment guy who comes from the younger point of view that think the American dream is broken for us. We can't obtain or own things. We can't participate in this American dream that our elders participated in, and was trying to kind of give that voice. But what I would say, to Gavin so I didn't watch, I'm not into, so what I didn't watch of Charlie were the debate things. I don't like when Ben Shapiro went around, facts don't care about your feelings and stuff, I'm just not into that. Or I actually don't consume very much conservative content beyond, for example, I don't listen to anyone at Daily Wire at all. That just doesn't interest me. I'm obviously hearing the TLC. I'm listening to Paul Vanderklay talk for 2.5 hours about something, So that's just not something that grabs my zeitgeist. But I do think that he was, because there were times where even Trump was wanting to do something, and he would just be down here listening to people in the pulse of his emails, and would go against what was happening, and actually had an ability, Gavin, to speak into the administration and say, hey, this is wildly unpopular with your American First people. And so he had the ability to change things.
So I think actually, like, there's this, so like if we were to begin to have like a conversation about problems and solutions, I don't think that gets popularized. Like, there's something about people seeking status and reputation and popularity that's combined with like the distribution of things like capacity to handle complexity and think through problems and the joy of solving problems, which results in very few people actually being willing and able and identified to get connected with the people in positions of power and influence. And like one of the big, so take the TLC, it's like TLC is not talking about problems and solutions. In fact, when I came into this space, I got kicked out of Bridges of Meaning for wanting to talk about problems and solutions, right?
I remember that day.
Well, I mean, and even now, like, I'm trying to, like, I would love to pivot to a conversation, and it's like I'm trying really hard, and it's like, how do I just keep poking and say, have that conversation, Lance? Come on, let's have the conversation. What do you keep? You redirect every time. You're redirecting to the bike shed that you can talk about. There's this bike shedding effect. Whereas, like, instead of discussing how the safety of the nuclear facility, everybody talks about the color of the bike shed, because it's the only thing everyone can talk about. There's only a few people who can talk about the nuclear power plant, right? So, you know, this is the, I don't know if you get a sense like this is part of the problem that's happening. Is it,
So
like,
sure, no. I
we're all
100%,
vastly
dude. Like,
unqualified to actually solve the problem.
well, so here's the other thing. Like, Paul talks about this all the time. Like we're dealing with human beings. We're humans. Like, so just the mess we find ourselves in. I actually think that the whole meaning crisis, the people that are deconstructing, coming back in, the whole thing that came around Jordan Peterson and this little corner and all sorts of other things that are happening. You see this weird thing where the church is experiencing this weird thing in America where you still have a fairly big rush out of the church, but then there's this weird Gen Z driven, they're still there, rushed in. So you're seeing all these like things that are, so I think there are problems and solutions. One of the reasons why I removed myself, Gavin, from this little corner, there were first off, God told me to shut up and quit arguing, and not those exact words, but I knew what he meant, right? So I was trying to figure out, because I don't want to come on here and argue about orthodoxy, like, but I am like being greatly impacted like it. So that's okay. Like, I can share my experience, strength, and hope. But and so I didn't want to get into that stupid fight or whatever.
Well, it could be a different spirit. It doesn't have to be the spirit of like trying to win.
Yeah, I need to learn how to do it better. See, I'm a lawyer. I'm an arguer. So God is just like saying, just shut up. Like, you need to learn how to do this a little better. I'm changing you. Like, why don't you take yourself off? And the other thing, which is like, I do think, and I like what you're trying to do here, Gavin, like, we're living in this meaning crisis world. And Sam so artfully started talking about moralistic therapeutic deism, and he's going to go on to where it's at now and where it's going. But a lot of this meaning crisis stuff is coming down to materialist, kind of secular atheist, kind of that sort of world that's been pushed down on us for at least in the United States of the last 10, 15 years, whatever. And then we have this, these other worldviews. The soup we're living in is causing the meaning crisis in people, nihilism, right? So that's kind of part and parcel. Now, if I had the solutions, Gavin, like, I don't know that I have the solution. I'm searching for the solutions. It starts with me, but to leave out this culture war stuff, like we don't want to talk about politics in the corner because, ooh, that's bad. I don't worry about that. It's like, well, okay, there's something in the middle. But one of the other reasons why I removed myself is, and you asked me the question, so I went here. I realized I needed to remove myself from the corner because most people don't want to talk about those things. And I respect the spirit of the corner or the spirit of people's channels. So Jacob welcomes me to talk about those things. So I go there because that's okay with him. But I don't go to anybody else's channel and talk about it because people don't want to talk about those things.
Okay.
Yeah. And the secret text
sense,
threads.
Sam?
Yes, the secret text threads where we do get to indulge in talking about those things.
But that's okay because it's
Yeah.
people we've given each other permission to do that. Like, so that's okay. I do respect, like, so for example, if I went to a Unitarian church and I wanted to join that Unitarian church, what I would
The
realize
liberal
is
kind or the conservative kind?
Sam's kind. I would go to Sam's kind.
All right.
Yes, but I would know if I wanted to join that, I would have to shut my mouth about Trinitarianism if I wanted to join the group. Like that would just have to be, okay, no, when I engage here, I'm not going to be the guy causing problems or whatever if I wanted to join that group. Like, because I respect, like, spaces have traditions, rules, and if I want to participate in this.
But this is where, like, Matthew 18 on rebuking comes in. Like, I feel like we were handed some kind of a overview of, like, how do we go about, like, the baptism and the purification of, like, the whole world, it's like, and it scales and it's fractal and we get to practice it and we're not going to do it perfectly. And so just stay in a way and trying not to bring your insight. That's not the right answer, but learning how to do it, like with the gentleness of a dove and the wisdom of a serpent. That's good.
A foreshadow of something I'm thinking about for my part 2 of my moralistic therapeutic deism is that I really feel like America is going to go through a period where we don't have a uniting story that is able to be shared by both sides. And that I think that the polarization is not done polarizing. And that moralistic therapeutic deism, when it was working at its best, was something that there could be a left-wing flavor of and a right-wing flavor of, but it still did the uniting thing, right? And that was sort of its goal, is I'm the arena where both of you get to play, and more than just you two as well, right? And we have this American story and we have this vague spiritual flavor, but like Ronald Reagan was very much a moralistic therapeutic deist. He was a perfect example of it, but so was Barack Obama, at least in his early phases, right? So but they were still playing in the same arena, and you kind of pick different ingredients to emphasize. The other side picks different ingredients to emphasize, but it's fair game. And what I feel like is happening is that the shared thing is breaking, kind of because the left wing tried to grab control of the arena and then use their control of the arena to then kind of play foul. And then Trump was sort of a reaction to that, but also an instigator of that. And part of the reason why people liked Trump is they could tell that the arena was becoming unfair to the right and that Trump was fighting against that and that they couldn't control him. But what I think is happening is that the arena is sort of breaking and that there is, at this point, at least not a very good shared arena between the left and the right. And I think that there's going to be, it's going to go into 2 different arenas, and that's a dicey situation because how these 2 things interact with each other without just warfare. Fair question. I don't know. But I think that it's going to be very hard to be a left-leaning Christian in this situation, because I think that the left-leaning arena is going to get just more and more overtly anti-Christian, and that the right-leaning arena is going to be more and more overtly Christian, and that there's going to be people who are going to be caught between those 2 things or not know where they fit in.
So like I feel like I can play a character, right? And so perhaps within Christianity, like, and you've done it, Sam, with Unitarianism, but it's like traditional Christianity needs to learn how to have serious conversations where Trinitarianism is this large thing. You need to be able to learn how to have serious conversations with a very intelligent person who can see lots more complexity than most, if not all, Trinitarians in the form of Sam Tiedemann. But
I'm still waiting for them to step up to that call, for the record. Still waiting for the challenge to be accepted for that conversation.
We could practice with a conversation like that, but we could also practice with a conversation about immigration and the war on drugs. How do we make education better? How do we make healthcare better? Like, there's so much corruption within all of these institutions. Like,
Yes.
And so like we get the opportunity to try to lead by example. So we got to find someone who's traditional enough, who's willing to come on screen and have a serious conversation, who's both like can actually be like the humble child I was pointing out at the beginning of Matthew 18. It's like, can you actually come in and listen, and understand the perspective of this other person and see how it's coherent, and why this very intelligent person has a different view, you know, and how they thought about all these pieces, and can they answer hard questions? Like, what are the hardest questions we could throw at Sam and see how he responds with the Unitarian answer? And like, so, but I'll use Unitarianism as just like an example, which I don't even think that's super important compared to like, is your salvation dependent on you having the right views on Unitarianism or Trinitarianism? It's like
some people certainly seem to think so.
I don't think so.
I get told that quite frequently, but I think one thing that Charlie Kirk also illuminated is that for a long time, Christian evangelism was trying to figure out how to communicate towards the left, right? How do we evangelize the left? We're going to assume that the right is good for now, right? How do we make our message palatable to the left? And that was Tim Keller's thing. And that's why a lot of people got mad at Tim Keller, because he often seemed like he was trying to dissociate himself from the right to make himself more palatable to the left, right? Coddle left, punch right. That was the criticism of him. And Charlie Kirk was like, wait a minute, there's a lot of people to evangelize over there on the right. What if we lean in that direction? What if we God and country harder? And that is actually an evangelism technique. And it seems to be working way better than the Tim Keller approach did, because Charlie is finding all these lost boys, basically, who really like the God, family, country message. And it's an inspiring vision for them. And that evangelism perhaps proved more effective of what if we just evangelize in the rightward direction? There's all these people over in the right who actually aren't Christian yet.
Yeah.
Focus on them. They're easier targets. They're sitting ducks for us.
If you think the right is smarter than the left, then maybe they're going to be the ones who are more likely to get the good news. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I like that Tim Keller video. I wish Paul would put. I need to just clip that out. It's so good. So I'm not a massive
He did clip
Tim
it
Keller
out.
guy.
He did clip
just
it
a
out.
little section. Okay,
It's on Vanderclips. You can find it.
Because it's so good, but it gets to the heart of what you're talking about, which is these two sides are polarizing more. Because what he did mention was, first off, if anybody has ever read the Federalist Papers, or if anybody's gone back and read what these guys were talking about or whatever, they set up a Christian nation. They just didn't want one particular denomination, but they absolutely set it up on Christian values. They were Christian men. They thought we would all have this at least nominal sense of this right and wrong, so on and so forth. And as Tim Keller pointed out, like, for the longest period of time, like, for example, just any sort of LGBTQ issues or whatever, I grew up a little bit in this time. There's no way you would have had this vast movement where they would have said, and even we go back to Obama and Hillary in 2008 when they weren't
right.
for
And
it.
I'm going to play a clip of Obama interviewed by Rick Warren in my upcoming video. Rick Warren says, so what is marriage? Obama says marriage is between one man and one woman. It's a sacred thing, and God is in the mix. He's like, and he seems to mean it, right? Like, there's even a little bit of Obama passion and fire as he's saying exactly that as a presidential candidate in 2008.
So here's the polarization. So what's happened now since that moment, we so radically shifted so crazily. It's like, but what Keller's pointing out is we had this basic underlying agreement that everyone operated from, even if you were progressive or conservative, it didn't matter. We've lost that. He's also pointed out now the left has come to top down impose their views on people, which isn't working, right? So here's the dilemma, Gab. So here's this interesting dilemma. When Charlie Kirk says something like marriage is between a man and a woman, one side agrees with that. The other side defines that as hate speech, right? Under which you should be prosecuted, jailed, and quite frankly, people saying hate speech, it's okay to murder them. that polarization you're talking about, Sam, like that's getting at the heart of kind of where we're at.
And I think that the gay marriage question really is the thing that broke moralistic therapeutic deism, because moralistic therapeutic deism, when it works, was a generous and welcoming Christian host who could accommodate other things, but the base level of the identity was still Christian and rooted in historical traditional Christianity. And that the gay marriage question suddenly really breaks the connection of moralistic therapeutic deism to traditional Christianity, because, like, you know, let's just be honest, Christianity has always been against gay marriage and homosexuality. It just has. And like, there's no way around that. You can try and creatively reread 2 or 3 passages in the New Testament to maybe try and, but no, like, let's just be honest. Christianity has always had the same definition of marriage and the same definition of Christian morality with regards to sex and its views on homosexuality. It just always has. And so if you're trying to change that, then you're saying that we're no longer just trying to recover true Christianity that might have been lost. We now know better than true Christianity ever did.
But here's the thing,
and it broke the system. I really think the gay marriage question broke the system.
But when Christians use the government with its guns to enforce the traditional view of marriage and sexuality, that is this is definitely what would you call it?
Is there an example of that, of government using guns to do that?
Well, I mean, it doesn't
I'm
need to
talking to
always
Gavin.
be.
Like, that
the
seems
guns
like a
can be
straw
lurking
man.
in the background, right? I understand Gavin's point that when the government decides something, even if there isn't an instance where they used guns to enforce it, the guns are there in the back of your mind. The jail, the prison warden, all of that's there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, anytime I've thought about breaking the law, there's this paranoia of people with guns, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's not so paranoid. But yeah, so like, but the thing is, there would be this for me.
But
like,
is that an ultimate good for society, Gavin, though?
But
To keep people, for example, for not murdering other people or stealing things, or, for example, bombing out some police stations and shooting ICE agents. And
so the thing is, I even challenge the whole nationalism thing. If you go back to the federalism, anti-federalist, I think it was a mistake as soon as we created the Constitution. Like I'm a Confederate. Like I wanted the Confederation, and so I would prefer to have many small governments cooperating and being different, learning how to.
Well, now we're talking, Gavin. Now we're talking. Now we're going.
So it was the evil came in, just barely snuck in and formed the Constitution. You know, it's been when the evil, you know.
But even if the United States isn't fighting over how to define marriage and using guns, then Alabama would have to, or, you know, like, whatever level that decision is being made at, they'll still have guns, they'll still have jails, they'll still have definitions of marriage.
Yeah, the blue states might lose them, and they might Gestapo go in and take your guns from you and arrest you. But the other states aren't going to.
So even if it's not in D.C., it would still be at the state level, and at some level, it's. A government is still a government.
So one of the things I want to speak to,
it's not just a government thing. Like when you have many states, like the more states you have, you actually have the capacity for every person to agree with their government can increase, because there's something about the ability to go to the people you agree with. And so, like, as your ability to find your people increases, like the capacity for all people to find their people will increase. So then the amount of polarization will decrease, right?
Well, so Gavin, you seem to be making an argument. I think we should have an infinitesimally small federal government. And particularly when we see these trillions and trillions of dollars, one side gets in. And so here's what I think.
I didn't say infinitesimally small.
I would also agree that we are too much in the direction of federal centralization, and we need to go back more in the direction of moving things down to the states.
Yeah. And there are hard problems.
Because
I'm not saying these are just easy things to deal with, but we should at least have some direction to move toward and think about ways to do it, and think about the trade-offs and costs of the different ways to go about going in the right direction.
The trade-offs is if the states get more powerful. I happen to live in Illinois, and that's probably a bad thing.
You might,
Right.
you might have
So
to
I
move,
would
but,
rather have the Trump and the federal government be limiting Illinois' power, but that's just my personal
Well,
circumstance.
you could move
And
though.
so-
There's a sacrifice, like a sacrifice to relocate, right? To be with your people.
Just as I think it's unfair to take my tax dollars to do things that I vehemently disagree with and spend it on those sorts of things, I respect those who have different viewpoints that don't want maybe where I would want federal dollars spent because I see it as a good or whatever. It's like, well, that's just, it's not fair, right? So I get both sides of that argument. That's why I think something smaller and more localized. And if you got rid of all federal taxation and you got rid of this sort of a deal, by the way, people, we live without federal taxation in this country and property taxes. But so when you talk about being local, like if your city, like if most of your, let's just say you switch that down to the local, I'm going with you, Gavin. And let's say if it was almost this thing where your highest tax rate went to your city and then it went to your state, right? Then we're getting down to like, when you talk about the school board decision-making, Sam, it's really interesting when it's this amorphous $1 trillion, we are running deficits. I want you to do this thing because I don't really notice it. But when we're in these smaller buckets, when I grew up at a time when this used to be true, and it's before we had this vast network where we knew everything, Gavin, there was this saying that was true, all politics is local.
Yeah. And that's
not true.
Like,
it's not true anymore. They've sucked us up into these national arguments.
And I think Jordan Hall in one of his recent conversations, maybe it was with Andy Crawford, says we need to carpet bomb the F out of public education. And I'm a little bit not quite there with him at the moment on that particular stance towards public education. But I would say I think it works so much better the more locally controlled it is. And that school districts need to be smaller and that they need to have more autonomy. There needs to be less decision made at even the state and the federal level so that they have more freedom to make their own decisions at a local level, and that the tax dollars should be very locally funded from the public school. That does have the inequality problem where rich areas will have more money than poor areas, but there's still a lot of benefit to local control.
Yeah, there's always trade-offs, and if you want to, you can go to the extreme, like we homeschool, and then I'm aware of a homeschool family where they just let their kids run wild and they end up being 15 years old and can't read, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like so there's all these trade-offs, like it's just unavoidable, but the cost of doing the big monoculture, monolithic, whatever the people are where they wear their glasses, that's like way too much cost and risk to just have a monolith. It's
easier for Satan to infect a monolith than it is for Satan to infect this very diverse, decentralized thing. Like my dad,
can become too decentralized and it can be too monolithic, and then hopefully as humanity like moves more toward the kingdom of heaven, it can become even increasingly decentralized.
Or maybe as we get holier, it does get more centralized. Because after all, the future government is a monarchy under Christ.
But it was
even though I love democracy, I will admit the future vision is not a democracy. It is a monarchy under the holy, perfect monarch. But
he's not going to dictate what every person has to do and say at every moment. Right?
There probably is going to be a lot of distribution. And I do think that that's what the kingdom of heaven is like, is this, perfect balance between centralized authority, but it's also not just like Jesus does everything and we just sit there and clap at how awesome everything he does is. It does seem like we have responsibilities and powers and things in subordination and cooperation with him as well.
Amen.
Yeah, the education piece is in the education piece is interesting. So I'm a CFO of an association of Christian high schools in the fourth largest city in the United States. So one of the things we're thinking about is, it's what's really interesting is that we're getting an increasingly larger number of secular parents that want to bring their kids, and it's actually in a so-called conservative state, trying to bring their kids, because they just what the parents want safety, and they want not just physical safety, but they want is safety from someone else indoctrinating their kids with certain ideas. They just want to be able to handle that. The second piece that's going to be really interesting about education moving forward, and this scares people, but I'll use the term personalized versus AI. There are these new models that are coming up that are going to allow kids to be able to get through their schoolwork in about 2 hours. Okay.
Yeah. At their own speed. You have like a personalized AI tutor. You'd like, okay, I'm working on 3-digit multiplication right now, but maybe Timmy's still only on 2-digit multiplication, but we're sitting next to each other, and like my AI thing is right at my proximal zone of development for my, next math lesson or whatever it is.
So what you envision is you don't have all these different classrooms where an hour this and you're just teaching to everyone. Because within 10 minutes, I was bored. Like within elementary school, like once I knew it, and I sat there for 45 minutes, had my time totally wasted because they needed to repeat whatever that is. But anyway, so what does that look like? It's like you actually have teachers around, kids are working on their work, and then teacher A can see, oh my gosh, Johnny and Susie, they're way behind. Okay, so she can go out and talk to Johnny and Susie. Now, it could just be Johnny and Susie are goofing around and they aren't doing anything. That's one problem. It could be that Johnny and Susie are struggling with whatever that is. So they can bring them into a little smaller, and a little smaller, you have these like, let's just think this like larger, almost library setting, just big room setting, but then you have these small little corridors, and then you can give Johnny and Susie specialized things. So you do that for about 2 hours. And then what do you do with the remaining parts of the day? Well, you're going to do things like in a Christian context, it's Christian school, but you're going to do things to teach grit, resilience, communication skills, the highly human EQ things, right? So you start building on those sorts of things throughout the day. So if you're into music, for example, once you've got your schoolwork done, and by the way, students who do this model out-test their other peers by a mile. And then like you could go like if you were really into music, and well, you could go work on your piano for 2 hours. You also could do your sports practices during that time. And then, so at any rate, the public schools are going to fight back on this like crazy.
Because the teachers are going to fight.
Teachers won't want to do it.
Not the parents or the students. The teachers are going to fight.
The teacher unions are going to fight it. So we actually see we have this amazing opportunity because we can be more agile. Now, here's what it does.
I really want to do this for a school, but yeah, it'll be the teachers union is the obstacle.
So here's the problem that are happening with the other large language models. Sam will know this better than me, but I'm going to say it. They scrape 40% is like Reddit, and then they go to Wikipedia. So they're scraping all of these, and then they also hallucinate, and about 20% of the time they get answers wrong. Okay. And so the question is like trying to get an answer, which is kind of what education was. You're not preparing your kids because everyone will have answers. It used to be, like I worked at a law firm and this guy was his tax expert, and you could just go down to the corner office and you'd say, hey, I got this issue. And he would say, oh, that's section da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Go look at this case, because he was the answer man. And I didn't have to go search in some book for 4 hours. Well, I don't need that guy anymore because I can just do a little query. I'll have the information. So answering stuff isn't going to be beneficial. But what you want to, first off, you want to teach them a Socratic method where the AI is like, walking them through and not just giving them an answer, but it's, hey, what are you looking at? Asking some questions. And it's interesting. So I've actually been looking at some of those models, Sam. And what's happening is some Christian groups are building their data set from their data. So you're not getting what's happening out there.
You're not getting a statistical imitation of Reddit, but a statistical imitation of something more to your alignment. Yeah.
So we're getting ready to pilot. Now, many of our parents aren't ready for that. Like people aren't ready for that. The other thing, and I get it, which is AI, everyone's so scared of it. I have fears about certain amounts of AI, but what's interesting is that just like the Amish, what our approach has been to that, Sam, is like, okay, we're approaching this new way like the Amish. Okay, let's figure out this technology is going to exist. Should we engage with it or not? Okay, if we're going to engage with it, how do we engage with it in a way that's best for kids, best for us? And how do we teach them a healthy way to utilize it? So it's going to be really interesting where education
Let's be in
goes,
touch,
but
Lance. I want to hear. I'm very curious about that. I have to run in like -2 minutes, but can I share an interesting anecdote? So I was doing some research on the demographics of my school district, and I'm in the northern suburbs of Chicago, and so a lot of the school districts in the northern suburbs of Chicago, some have gained enrollment over the last 5 years, many have lost enrollment. So I was doing a statistical analysis of which variables explain which school districts gained in enrollment, which ones lost in enrollment, and I had a ton of variables. Is it like average house price? Is it parent, or is it teacher to student ratio? Is it the debt rating of the school district? Is it the math scores? Is it like, throw all of the variables in the kitchen sink at this to try and explain it. I also included one more variable that was the percentage of the district that voted for Kamala Harris versus Trump. Guess which variable had all of the explanatory power while none of the other variables mattered in the least? People were moving from the very liberal school districts to the moderate districts, right? In the northern suburbs of Chicago, they're like the most red district you can find is like 55% Trump, 45% Harris. That's as red as it gets. So, but you can also find 95% Harris and 5% Trump districts. They were moving from the super blue to the purple districts. And that was the only variable that explained it. So when you were talking, Lance, about parents moving, even secular parents wanting to avoid this indoctrination, that was exactly what was going on, is that the parents are, even probably Kamala Harris voting parents, don't want to live in a 95-5 place. They would rather live in a 55-45 place and send their kids there. And so anyway, I should do a tweet thread on that or something.
We'll talk about this offline. I'll actually put you in connection with some things we're doing. You might be interested, just so you can educate yourself.
I would be fascinated. Yeah, we'll be in touch, Lance. Anyway, Gavin, thanks for hosting. Gotta run.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I think I know my wife Kim would be interested if you guys end up with technology or models, and it would be so cool. That's been a big vision of the power of using artificial intelligence to provide the customized experience. But I look at it not just for learning and teaching, but also there's other things that are happening. It's this curation of knowledge that's happening, and it's accelerating with artificial intelligence. And then there's also this capacity to be aware of each person's strengths and weaknesses. And so when you, and then it will change and grow, so that you had said, maybe there's two people struggling. Eventually you're going to have a hard time finding a teacher that's better than an AI to come in and help those kids who are struggling. It's going to be hard.
Well,
because
what
you'll be
we
able
realize
to take
is
the expertise of those people who come in, and you would be able to document it as part of the either the training data for fine tuning, or the post training, or the retrieval augmented generation, and fetching the expertise in order to.
So here's what the AI does to the teacher. So when that teacher's sitting in that room and she's kind of monitoring his kids are working, if they're actually trying to work on it or whatever, and it'll ask them questions. Why are you stopping here? I don't understand this. I don't understand, or whatever. So there are some things that are happening within as they're working on things. And then what it will do is it'll give the teacher to say, it would appear that Johnny and Susie are struggling with this understanding of this aspect. So you go into this side room, and then the teacher will work with them, but also it'll say, hey, work with them live with these problems, right? So then it's both-sided, Gavin, right? Like you talk about that, it's going to be pretty incredible. And then the other thing is I think about this, and my kids are in their 20s, and I don't know how much I can impact them much anymore. But how do you have a healthy relationship if you're going to have you can do the Vervaeke thing, which is never use an LLM, right? Or are you going to try and teach your kids to engage in a healthy way with it if you can? It's a really interesting conundrum we're in.
I mean, I think we've already had all of this before, but maybe this one's more potent. But it's like social media or any media, anything on the internet.
The printing press, Gavin, the printing press.
The books you're reading, the movies we're watching. It's these things are all very powerful. How do you relate with them? The college football, athletics, sports, medicine. How are we supposed to relate with all this? Go ahead.
So one of the things we're trying to do, Gavin, is we understand, there's a hunger for homeschooling is really growing, but there are most parents are going to have some blind spots or some loopholes, right? Maybe your kid's super into math and science and wants to get into calc and, advanced physics and stuff like that. Well, you don't know how to teach that. I wouldn't be able to teach that with any proficiency. And so what we're trying to provide is, there's these things called blended school models where you could do like homeschool stuff for most of the time, but then you can also come to the school to do certain other activities. And it could be even, whether that might be sports or band or something, so they can get some of that stuff that's hard to do kind of individually.
Yeah.
And so it's
We
a
have
blended
some of
model
that.
between those.
We have some of that in Alabama. So we'll be looking at making sure our kids get to go play soccer, for example, would be a nice one.
You bet. Well, I'm -8 minutes needing to go. So at any rate,
I need to go too.
Good to talk with you, Gavin. Keep
Thank you,
challenging
Brian.
me on my BS.
I mean, I'd love to challenge you. You need to get in touch with me. Say I need to be challenged. So please connect with me on Discord.
All right.
All right. See you, Lance. Bye. All right, people. Thank you for your attention. Be careful with your attention. Go love each other. Bye-bye.